first of two interviews conducted with Carmela Sinagra in her Wanneroo home. This first interview took place on the 29th of April 1994.
Hello, would you like to tell me your date of birth and your full name?
Well, my name is Carmela Sinagra. I was a muni. I was born on the 3rd of May 1931 in Perth. My granddad arrived out from Sinagra in 1921 to try his luck, as they used to say, to get rich, after having tried his fortune in Argentina.
Oh.
Yes, and then they went back to Sinagra, and from Sinagra he came back out here. He was out here for so many years, and he went back to Sinagra and brought Grandma back in 1929.
What kind of work did he do?
Well, he had a vineyard. Once he sort of settled out here, he had vines, and they used to make wine, sell the grapes at the markets, and what they didn't sell or didn't have time to pick, they used to make wine and sell the wine.
Where was his vineyard?
Where Wanneroo Autos are, at the 13 Mile Peg Wanneroo.
Oh, right. So what years was he out there then?
Well, he would have been there all that time. No, when they first came out from Sinagra, they were up Pinjar on the little, well, I'd call it a settlement, but they were all up, all the Italians sort of seemed to have gone up there, the Sinagra, up where the Sinagra property is, yes, right up there. And from there then he came down here and bought the property here, and they planted vines and olives down here. Mum didn't go to school because she was only, well, she was 15, she was too old to go to school, but the others all went to school at the state school, and the youngest one at the St Anthony's school. I used to have to, we started off down, what's built up here? Wanneroo Machineries, I think they're called, down at the 12 Mile, after my mum and dad eloped because my grandfather didn't want my mother to marry my dad, so they eloped, and they went to live in this place down near Conti's vineyard, you like to call it their wine tavern, and then from there they went up to Carabara, we used to call it, now it's called Carabuda, where he rented property off old Harry Gibbs. And up there I can recall our house being, our kitchen was tin with a bare floor I mean sandy floor, an open fireplace where we used to cook all our, it was on a bit of iron, and with the floor we used to get the bushes, the gum leaves, and we used to sweep that as if it was the floor. We used to always keep it clean. Our dining room had concrete on the floor in Hessian, and our bedroom had timbers and tin. We thought we were in luxury. But we weren't allowed to build anything permanent because the landlord wouldn't allow it. So that's what we had to sort of put up with. Then from there, because they weren't happy with the landlord, they moved up to Yanchep, and we gardened in the Yanchep National Park just before you get into the actual park itself.
What, you had a market garden?
We had a market garden there, yes. And once again, because it was National Park, we weren't allowed to put up a permanent building. But we did have a better building where we had floors and all of it. It was all concrete floors and timber once again, and the outside was all iron, so you could sort of take it away when you had to go. I went to school on the bus. We used to catch the bus at 7 o'clock in the morning, come all the way down to Wanneroo, then go back up Pinjar to pick the kids up at Pinjar, then back down to St Anthony. That was actually, I have two brothers and a sister, and we used to all catch the bus to go to school together. And our brother's name, I suppose I should give you those.
Yeah, well, when did your parents marry? Are they eloped? What year?
In 1930.
In 1930.
Mm.
And how many brothers and sisters did your mother have?
Two brothers
Mm-hmm.
and one sister.
And they all married?
They all married.
Wanneroo as well.
Mm. Oh, well, Tony Villanova's her oldest brother. He married a Fremantle girl. Louis married a Polish girl, and Chris married his older brother.
So your mother was Villanova?
Mum was a Villanova.
And she married a Mooney?
She married a Mooney.
Okay. And why was the problem with them getting married? What was the problem there?
Oh, well, because somebody else apparently had gone to Grandpop and said he wanted to marry his daughter, and Mum didn't want this other fella. So in those days you had to do what you were told, so she cleared off with Dad.
And how old was she then?
18?
18.
No, 17. 17. Yes, 17. And Dad was 22.
Was she accepted back into the family after?
Oh, yes. After a while. I was the firstborn. Then there was my brother Sebastian and my brother Tony, Antonio, and my sister Rosa. It's 4 of us. I'm the eldest.
They must have found it hard. Did
They did find it hard because in those days you worked at the gardens, you didn't have tractors. You had spades and you dug it all by shovel and fork and hoe. And you're watering, so you had to have drains to get your water in, and you got your water out of the drain to water your plants until you got them established. They went down into the mud to get their own water, and then they were right. But in those days too, you only grew your crops seasonal, not all year round like they can do under the sprinklers these days. But they were lean times, but we never went without because we were really self-sufficient. When we were living at Carrabah, I can remember we had a huge, to me as a child looked huge, pig. We used to, at the beginning of summer, because you had so much waste in your veggies, you bought a pig to fatten it for your winter. So you'd feed it all the waste tomatoes and veggies that didn't go to market. And then in the winter time, you would kill that pig and preserve the meat, make your sausages, you'd dry your sausages, you'd have some fresh, you'd melt your fat down to make lard. A lot of them used to make the soap from lard, which Mum never did, she never had the need to, but a lot of people did make soap. For milk, we had a goat. That was our milk supply. We had our own chooks. So we had chicken and we had eggs. And when we went to live up at, like in the Yanchep Park there, Dad used to walk to the beach and catch a feed of fish and then walk all the way home with a feed of fish. And they were beautiful, those fish. I can still taste them. Mainly rockfish because they didn't sort of go in boats or anything. They just sort of went out, caught a feed and come home, you know. And the abalone too, in those days were abundant. Now, I mean, there's none, you know. It's a pity. But I went to boarding school from there. I was probably one of myself and another girl was the first to board at Les Moody from Wanneroo. In those days we didn't have high schools in Wanneroo. and you didn't have the transport to get into Perth. You had to either board out, because that was a no-no. And to say,
Carmela, can you remember your grandparents?
I can, yes, and even the kids do too. One of them in particular says when he saw one of our cousins who does look very much like Nana, he says, gee, she looks like Nana, even to the petticoat that's hanging, showing by about 2 inches. Oh.
Do you remember the house they lived in?
Yes, actually, I used to quite often have to go there from school. We lived north and they lived south, you see, and if Dad was in town, they'd pick me up down there, and sometimes slept overnight, and I used to be terrified because the room that was Chris, I shared with Chris, was over a cellar, and there was a door with the steps going down in that floor, and I used to be terrified of falling through this door thing, although I used to go down the cellar with her, you know. But all the homes, or most of the homes, had cellars to be able to preserve things and keep things, because you didn't have fridges, so you had to have somewhere to keep them cool.
Where were they living at that time?
They were living down here at Wanneroo Autos, the Villanovas,
Right.
and we were living up either Carabuda or Yanchep in those days. Dad used to employ like a man to help him with the garden and picking and the packing.
How long did your grandparents work for?
Till he died.
Mm.
Granddad died at 62 of cancer, and Dad died at 63 with cancer. Saturday night was a big event. Even though we lived all the way up at Yanchep, you never missed a movie. Every Saturday night, Dad would, in the old truck, pile us all on, and off we went to the movies. Particularly if it was a silly old Tarzan. Don't ask me why. Nobody missed the Tarzan show. Yeah, and in the old days too, they used to have busy bees at the church, and Dad and Grandpop, his dad and a few others, the riggers, quite a few of them, had this busy bee, and they'd help to clean the grounds for the church till they eventually got that up, the school grounds.
Going back to your grandparents, did they ever miss Italy?
Can't say that they really did.
No.
They never ever showed it. I can remember Nana here. They never ever showed missing, because one of Nana's brothers and his wife and family came out after the war, and her sister and family came out after the war, so she actually had somebody here, but not before the war. But Nana used to dry all her own fruit, make all her own sauce. They used to do all their olives, pickle the olives, pickle your veggies. You were self-sufficient, you had to be.
Pasta?
Yes, we used to help to turn this blessed thing with one foot on to make the pasta. Bread, I can't recall her making bread, not a great deal of bread, Nana. Yeah. Like Mum used to make a lot of bread, but no, they never.
Did they speak Italian? They kept their own language.
They did, yes, and strangely enough, she could even talk a little bit of English. Big happy family, and my mum looked on Mrs. Cockman as a mum, because they were all up that area, and we used to get on really fine. And I mean, as a kid, because you were brought up differently, we didn't have the likes of Vegemite and pickles, as we Australians call pickles, like you have your green tomato pickles, your cauliflower pickles. Well, the first place I ever tasted those was at Cockman's. Well, then they in return come down to our place and have whatever they could pick off our table, like sausages and things, you know. And this is how we really got on really well.
Right.
And they were a great lot, really.
How did your grandmother cope if she didn't speak much English?
Well, because you had the children,
Yeah.
Oh, but they never really went anywhere.
and
though.
they never went because you didn't have vehicles to go in it. That was ending, I think. You didn't have vehicles to go anywhere anyway. And then when you did go, you sort of, as I said, an occasion for a party, and you all got together.
Well, everyone would bring a plate.
Oh,
wouldn't they?
no, they didn't. Particularly with his people. They had cattle, they had pigs. They'd either kill a pig or they'd kill a cow. Okay. And she had a big oven. You know, one of these great big ovens. And they'd just stick a thing in there and cook it. And so it was enough to feed everybody. She'd make the bread. We used to think, wow, homemade bread. It used to weigh a ton, but it was still homemade bread. It was good. And for us to get bread, so we used to get a baker delivery come to the house, but they only used to come 3 times a week. It was Monday, Wednesday and Friday. So from Friday then you didn't get any more bread till Monday.
Where did the bread come from?
It came from Wanneroo Bakers in North Perth.
Right.
And so we'd be able to get bread because by the time we were at the end of the line and half the time you wouldn't have any left, or you might have got a loaf or 2 loaves when you wanted, say, 4 or 5 loaves. And we used to get it picked up, we used to pick it up and bring it up on the school bus down here at the school. We'd leave it at the post office and not go and collect it and take it home on the school bus. But by the time we got home, we'd eaten 1 or 2 loaves anyway. We'd get the middle out and then eat the crust.
And then you got into trouble, did you?
Oh, no, not really. No, we just didn't get afternoon tea when we got home.
What? One thing I did want to ask, what about the war years when...
Well, through the war years, now it says, I could remember a lot about the 10th Light Horse. I used to, where they were and everything, because we were, as I said, the end of the line. And my dad used to cart his stuff into market. We were contracted to grow cabbages for the army.
Mm-hmm.
He was fortunate enough not to be taken as a prisoner of war. I mean, they're taken for nothing at all here at the time. They interned them.
Did you have to register as an alien or...?
I don't remember that, really. They probably did, yeah. And he used to grow the like the cabbages. He was contracted to grow the cabbages for the army, but the tomatoes and all that used to go to market. Well, we used to have on the vehicle what they used to call blackout, and you could only just have little slits in your vehicle. You could only just see where you were going to go to market.
This was your lights.
Yeah, yeah. And you had a guard stop you, and he'd go through your vehicle up the 22, what we used to call the 22 mile, and they checked all vehicles going into town. And you had to get your petrol. Your petrol was rationed, so they only gave you so much to get you there and back. You sort of didn't really have running around petrol, if you know what I mean. And we managed quite well, really. Really, we managed quite well. You didn't have, I mean, not like today, you've got to have shoes that match your dress, and you've got to have the dress of the year, the fashions and all that. Well, we had nothing like that, and we didn't miss them, you know what I mean? We all had gramophones, because that was your music. And when my granddad down here, he had a big radio which was run off a battery. So that's how we'd get our radio music.
What did you do for water out there? I mean, when you first moved on to Piccadilly Swamp was the first area, wasn't it? What did they do for water?
Well, we used to have a well. You put down a casing and you didn't have to go too far. So that was your water. It used to be lovely and cold. You sort of pulled it up with a bucket. But because it wasn't too deep, we only just used to hoist it up by hand. And your butter, we used to put in a plaster of Paris dish, put in the bucket and send it down the well, and only just have it sitting in the water, and that used to keep it firm. Your meat, you didn't eat a lot of bought meat, but when your carrier, because you didn't always go, in the later years Dad used to have a carrier take his stuff to market, And he used to bring meat back for us occasionally if we wanted it. But otherwise you'd have, in those days, you'd have your swan, your cooked sauce, you had your wild duck, you baked it. Even your black cockatoos would make a good soup.
Oh, really?
Yes. Your swamp hens made a lovely sauce. I mean, these days I wouldn't touch any of them. I mean, you wouldn't be allowed to, but even if you were, I couldn't say that I'd eat them, you know? And even your wattlers, you cleaned those and you roasted them.
What's the wattler?
It's a little, very little bird.
Oh,
Very little bird. It's only a brown bird with a big beak. They're called wattlers. Well, those you roasted, because if you cooked it the other way, there'd be nothing left. And mind you, it never killed or hurt any of us. Rabbits, we used to have rabbits. We didn't have the rabbits, we used to catch the rabbits because there's that many of them.
and were there lots of families living around that area, around that Piccadilly swamp?
Well, this is the swamp actually, not actually in Piccadilly. When it was at the Piccadilly swamp, Joe's dad and my dad worked that in the actual Piccadilly swamp. But this is in the Yanchep Park Reserve.
Right.
There was the Rabonis, and Rossariti was also up there. There was only the three of us. And those three were sort of together at Carabuda.
Right.
But because, see, Mr. Gibbs wouldn't give Mr. Raboni, and I don't know whether he wouldn't give him land or something happened anyway. I forget what the dispute was all about. They decided to just move on, and they went up to Yanchep and got land up there.
You weren't allowed to buy land like the...
You weren't allowed, you couldn't, even, didn't matter if you had millions, you could not buy land because it was already allocated to this one and that one sort of thing.
So you just leased your little...
So we just always leased till he eventually then came down to Wanneroo, up here, opposite the showgrounds, and he bought, there was 100 acres in there, and actually where the Wanneroo shopping centre is, part of that was his. And then he sold it to Tony Villanova, and they put up the shopping centre. In I think it was 46, he came down here. And he also had property where Wanneroo Waters is, there's 2 acres there. And then he came up here.
Carmela, would you like to tell me a little bit more about your father? Do you know when he was born? Roughly, you don't have to give me.
He was born in September, I don't remember the year. He would have been 86, so that would be 1908. Yeah,
And what was his
1908.
first name?
Benedetto. He was known as Old Ben here in Wanneroo. Respectively, they used to call him Old Ben. And
Where did he come from?
he came from Sinagra. He left behind Mum and Dad. And he actually came with his sister. She also came. Sister and brother-in-law came at the same time. And he lived with them for a while before he actually went to look for work.
When did he come out from Italy? Roughly?
1927. Dad came out in 1927.
What made him come towards Australia?
Well, to try and better themselves is the reason why they came. 2 sisters that were already left Sinagra went to America, and unfortunately he never ever saw his mum and dad or his older sister once he left Sicily. when he arrived here, he went to live up, I don't know what they call that road, anyway, up Carabuda with his brother-in-law and sister. And then he went looking for work. And in those days, there wasn't a great deal of work. So he went bush clearing, and they used to have to knock down these big trees. They did all that by hand in those days. And he also burned. They had a season where they used to knock them down, and they had the season, the burning season, and they used to have like a group or gangs, whatever you like to call them, go out and say they'd do Southern Cross 1 month or week or whatever they did, I don't know how long. Then he'd go down to, he reckons he was doing work down at Benja as well, which is down south somewhere. And half the time, if they had nowhere to sleep, he said they'd sleep in the railway station.
And they were usually Italian men he worked with.
Yes, yeah, it'd be a group of them. Even up at Mullawall, he did some up that way as well. Yeah. And then once he got back down here and he eloped with Mum, it was always...
How did they meet?
Well, I think, see, the families would have known one another back home, and then when they got here, to be quite honest, I don't know.
But it was obviously they loved each other.
Yeah. And Dad used to love music. He loved dancing, and he loved his wine too. We used to make our own wine. He used to go over to Swan, over to Millenden, and pick his grapes every year, come back. In the earlier part of the wine making, you used to have to crush it with your feet in a trough.
You all have to get in there and do it.
And you'd all get in there and do your wine, but then in the later parts of life, you sort of had a crusher and you had a press and all that. Got your wine out that way.
So tell me how you make the wine from the grapes.
Well, they used to go out, and we all went out, a whole lot of us. And we used to think it was great because it was like a picnic. You took your lunch out with you because you wouldn't get it finished. You know, we used to leave early so it wouldn't get too hot. You went out to pick it, and you came back and it'd sit on your truck there for the next day. And then the next day you'd have your wash troughs. You know these big cement wash troughs? So you put it in there and you get in there and you stomp it and get all the juice out from underneath. And then you'd put it back up into your barrels. Then you have to let it ferment before you can put a top on, because otherwise it'd explode. And then once it fermented, everybody had like a cellar, what we call an upstairs cellar or a downstairs cellar, but you always had somewhere to put your 2 or 3 barrels of wine.
They weren't fancy wines, it was just how they came.
That's right, just how they came. You might have even got vinegar, so you think, oh no, well we can't use that this year. We'll just have it for pickling. So you see you had your own vinegar for doing your own pickling. But
they were good times.
They were good times. They were good times.
And you'd socialise a lot with the other Italian families?
Well, we did, yes. So they used to like to play cards too. Even in their young days, they used to play football. I mean, not the true football, but they'd kick a football in the garden sort of thing, you know, just for a bit of amusement.
One thing with the Italian ladies, that my memories anyway, the ladies dressed in black, obviously in mourning for families. Were your family like that? Did they wear the black more?
Well, my grandmother insisted there was to be no black worn when she died.
That was her.
Yes, that was her wish. She said we were not allowed to wear black when she died.
And how did you all feel about that?
Well, a bit funny because it was the tradition, everybody wore black. You didn't go to a funeral unless you wore black. But when she says no black, they all wore part. I think they either had a skirt or a jumper or something that had black, but otherwise they didn't wear black.
You feel that she wanted you to become Australian?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's quite funny if somebody spoke to her and she didn't quite, wasn't the understanding, it was the being able to reply. She go, I mean, I understand. Yeah, I mean, I understand.
But she knew what was going on.
My dad had to have appendix out when he was young, and it was in Royal Perth, and that's where he learned to read. He could read the paper. Could never write it. He wasn't a perfect reader, but he could put bits together. But my mother could read fluently.
It must have been very difficult for those Italian families when they came out here and no language. And...
Well, it was difficult. It was difficult. But as I say, see, the Australians that were here then, the English people, were quite nice. Till the war broke out. And then you were their enemy.
Was that a sudden thing? Was it?
It was really. It was, because then they were fighting you then. Well, even, I mean, you could have been next door neighbours, as good as anything, you know, friendly until the war broke out, and then you were the Dings or the Dagos.
Really? And even people who you've been quite close to had
Yeah,
this
yeah,
reaction
you know,
to
you sort of, yeah. But
And
we got by.
some people were interned. Did you know any families that were interned locally?
Yes, up that way. They, one fellow was interned just because he had crackers.
Really?
And I mean, we used to
what
have
do you mean by crackers?
firecrackers. You know, we used to have Guy Fawkes night
Oh yeah.
because he had some of those. Yeah, he was interned. I mean, it was a silly thing. I think somebody just wanted to put him in for any excuse at all. You didn't dare say anything because you could be the next.
And how did, if the men were interned, how did the women cope that were there?
They just had to cope.
Financially,
Financially, they were used to nothing, so they didn't miss it, if you know what I mean. You had to live off what you had.
So the women would work the garden while the man was away. It's awful.
And have the kids out there with you. Yeah.
And how did the Italians amongst your family who had actually been born in Italy, how did they feel about the war? Where were you, I mean, obviously they had some allegiance to their own country, and there must have been a lot of conflict there for them.
They were all for Mussolini, and even today I've heard people say, now if you had Mussolini you wouldn't have mafia, you know. And then once Italy sort of surrendered, well, they thought, oh goody, you know, we're all friends again. That was because nobody really wanted war, you know.
Carmela, you were saying about during the war years the effects, the reaction of the British background people.
Yeah, well, we weren't very well liked, and as I said, we were called the Dings and the Dagos. But once Italy sort of surrendered, then things sort of changed. Here through the war years too, you had to have coupons. Everything was rationed. Your tea was rationed, your sugar was rationed, your butter was rationed, clothing was rationed. Well, the Italians, they either made their own butter if they had cows, or they didn't really use as much butter as an Australian would, so they'd swap their butter rations for something else, for maybe meat or something. And we were really lucky because, you know, we had no problems, and we didn't really have to go without. Maybe because there's only 4 of us in the family too.
But resourceful as well.
Yes.
You mentioned you could remember the light horse being here.
Yes.
Did you have much contact with them?
Not really, no, because I was only wasn't very old, maybe 11, 12, 13 maybe. I don't think I was 13. No, all I can remember is going to school, and there was all the army, and you say, oh, look, the army, you know.
Where were they?
Do you know? Well, actually, what is Pappas' swamp on that side? On this side, it's all bush. On Monterey Road, I'm talking about.
Okay, Pappas' Swamp is close to the...
It's on the opposite side of the road, on the other side of the swamp,
It's-
the other side of the lake.
Perhaps this swamp is close to Flynn, between Flynn Drive and Wattle Avenue.
That's correct.
Right.
And the army was this side of Wanneroo Road, from there right down to there. But then they used to go right the way through.
So they'd come up past your property.
Yeah, and at one stage, actually, they were camped opposite our place on the hillside. But they weren't the light horse, they were to do with the Army or Air Force at the time. Because at one stage there was talk of moving everybody out. So Yanchep at that time, I think it was used as a hospital or some Red Cross thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they were going to, I'm not quite sure, I forget that, because as I said, I was only a bit of a kid. They were going to evacuate everybody out, but then they found they didn't have to.
Mm. Do you remember aircraft coming over?
Oh, I can remember that aircraft that dropped a bomb and hit a boat out at Yanchep.
Really? What was that?
Bert Bowman, there was Bert Bowman, Neville, who was the other fella? Anyway, one of them got killed on it and two of them survived.
They were on the boat.
They were on the fishing boat.
And what happened? I didn't...
Oh, well, one of the planes dropped a bomb and hit the boat or close by the boat or something.
And accidentally, or they thought there was someone else? Or...
I don't know.
Was it talked about in the community? Or...
Not a great deal, not a great deal, no.
It was one of those things they didn't want to talk about.
That's right. Yeah, better forgotten. Yeah.
Okay, and Paps's Swamp. Tell me a little bit more about Paps's Swamp.
Well, in Papas's Swamp, there was a lot of Macedonians and Italians. The Macedonians were sort of at the Flynn Road end of the swamp, and the Italians were at Wattle Road end of the swamp. So they marketed, grew their vegetables all in that area.
Now, who actually owned all that land?
Papas, old John Papas.
And he leased.
And
a
he
lot.
leased it to these people. See, once again, I mean, they couldn't buy the property because he owned it all. But then eventually he did sell some, eventually. Well, actually, I don't know whether he did or somebody else did after him. And he also had property at Pinjar, which he leased. Because we used to do a lot of delivery in that for him, carry vegetables in. He also had a lime kiln.
Did he?
Yeah, but I don't know that he had that going for very long.
Did you have much? Did you see how the lime kilns work? Did you?
Did I?
Uh-huh.
No, not in those days. No. After we were married, Joe was cutting wood for the lime kilns, but I never ever went into them.
And tell me a bit more about Paps's Swamp. Obviously, did they keep their own culture in there?
They did, yes, they did for a long time. They did, yes, till they moved out. A lot of the Macedonians, I don't know whether you used to call them Greek, because to me they're all one. Moved out and went into fish and chip shops and businesses. You see, they didn't sort of hang around for long. Once they got a little bit of money, they were off. Well, Gapanis, as you might know, the Gapanis brothers, North Perth. Well, they were in the Papas's Swamp and they bettered themselves. Quite a lot of them sort of moved out.
And what about the Italian families who were in
Well,
there?
the Italian families, actually, see, two of the men died. They, Mr. Tucci and Arrigo, they died. And I'm not quite sure what they died of. Tucci died of cancer. Arrigo, I don't know. Mr. Martelli, I think it must have been something in the gardens.
What, they died down there on Paps's Swamp, did they?
Oh, in the later years, yeah. But Arrigo wasn't that old.
That was
He died.
good soil down there.
Very good. See, well, as I said earlier, because you had no irrigation, no such thing as electricity. We didn't have electricity in Wanneroo. We had nothing like that, and until such time as you had all that, you had no water supply. And when my dad moved down to Wanneroo, he had a twin-head diesel, and which you used to have to crank to get it started, to pump your water up from the well to do your irrigating, to water your crops and that.
And what did you do about lighting?
Lighting, kerosene lamps. And still no fridges. We didn't have a fridge then.
What about washing and...
All by hand, with coppers. You boiled your washing and then washed it in the trough by hand. And I'll tell you what, I reckon the washing came out really lovely and white. And all you had to pick from in those days was Persil or Rinso. Persil white, they used to call it.
Camilla, tell me, when you were a child, what did the Wanneroo town site look like?
When I was a child, all there was in the Wanneroo town site was Henry Dennis's shed. I don't know what he had in it. Might have been workshop. And alongside it was the old picture hall. In front was a little pokey asbestos thing which they made into a little lolly shop and drink. And alongside was a house. And we used to have to go all the way down here, and she lift up the front of this thing and you brought these lollies. And the woman that run that is still living in the Italian Villa Terenza home.
Right, who ran it?
And Mrs. Babagallo. And then we had the post office. Mr. Henderson had the place there. Then Miss Tapping, the two Miss Tappings run the post office from there. And we used to call them Auntie Dolly and Auntie Molly. And we used to get our lollies from there. And we used to buy our cordial drinks for a penny a glass. We didn't have cordial in our days. That was a luxury. So you bought it, you see, and that cost you a penny a glass. That's all. And then in the later years, we got an open-air picture theatre. We had a little shop on the front, on the other side, and we had tea rooms on the corner where the service station is. And of course, that all got demolished for bigger and better things, so they say.
Tell me a bit more about the pictures. Who ran the pictures?
The pictures, well, Mr. Dennis started them off, and then the Chrysophiles, Ned Chrysophiles mainly. And what they did, instead of having an interval, you had a movie, then interval time, all the kids got put to bed in the kids' room. And I can still remember being put to bed on this vinyl or leather mattress, wouldn't have been vinyl, would have been leather mattress in the kids' room. And the parents danced the night away then.
All night?
All night. So you had a movie and then you had a dance. And that's where I, perhaps say learned to dance, because you used to watch them do underneath the spreading chestnut tree. You used to get out and do all the actions. And I used to think it was great.
Who provided the music?
Oh, now you've got me. At one stage, in the later years, I know it was Isabel Gibbs, and she was an Isabel Bartlett at the time, but I don't remember who did it before. I was too little.
I'm going to ask you something really personal. What about dating and seeing boys?
Well,
Were you
as is custom, or was custom, you never allowed out on your own. If you went out, you had to go mum and dad, and off you went, and you accepted it. It was the done thing, and it didn't worry you.
That was only applied to the girls? Or the boys?
To the girls. No, not the boys, to the girls. Yeah.
And what about sex education? Did they?
No. And who said you need it?
Where did you learn the facts of life?
It just comes natural. Yep. It's part of nature, isn't it, really? I mean, who teaches the animals what to do? And if they had less of that in the school, they might have better, I won't say morals, but they wouldn't have so many problems.
So where did you meet your husband? Where did you meet Joe?
Oh, we used to go to school on the same bus.
Right.
Yes.
So you knew him quite well.
I knew him well, I know him quite well. And as I said earlier, he said we used to have parties. His dad, any birthday or christening or anything was an excuse for a party. So everybody used to just be one big happy family.
And you were telling me about the wedding. Tell me about an Italian wedding back then.
Well, back then you used to get married in the mornings because you couldn't have a church wedding in the afternoon. So we were married.
Why couldn't you have it in the
Oh, they wouldn't do it then. No way.
That was just Wanneroo.
Everywhere. If you were getting married in the church with a full church service, they wouldn't do just a marriage thing. It had to be a full church service. You had to get married in the morning. So we got married in the morning in St Anthony's. I went home. I got out of the wedding dress, just lazed around till it was night time. Then you got back into your wedding clothes, and you went up to the hall to have what we used to call the wedding breakfast, which was just with your immediate family.
This was Wanneroo Hall.
This is Wanneroo Hall, yes, the old tin hall. And then you had all of Wanneroo, kids and all, come to the reception. And what they used to call supper, so you had sandwiches and cakes and maybe a bit of chicken went round then, you see. But that's how it was done in those days.
And who catered you?
Margaritas.
Oh, right.
Margaritas. Eileen Margaria and Jess Chitty actually did our catering. I can remember that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Oh, and it was a big thing to have trifle. God, whoever saw trifle? We never had trifle. We didn't know what custard was. So it was a big deal to have trifle and all this sort of thing at your wedding because it's a big treat. You didn't have it. Although jelly had started to come in, I remember that. We were starting to make jelly.
I suppose what happened when you got married and you had children? Did you become more Australian with your cooking?
Yeah. Well, I do both, really. You know, I sort of...
You adapt.
You do, yeah.
Your children too.
Well, and not only that too, I think the Australian way of eating has changed too. They've gone more European than the European has gone Australian, if you know what I mean. Because really a lot of the Australian food, a lot of Australian people never cooked with salt and was pretty bland when you think, you know, you sort of, the European likes to flavour everything. But you used to make your homemade pasta, your homemade biscuits and all that sort of thing.